I'm Laura Fuchs, President, Washington Teachers Union, and we are going to be talking about accessing and the contract. There have been recent-ish, I say in like the last 5 years, arbitration wins that the WTU has had over accessing, and that I think has further refined our understanding of this process and the contract. And so some things may be new, even if, in general, you have a strong understanding of accessing. Even I learned something as someone who's been through this process many times from our attorneys who helped create this presentation and the resources that go with it. So we just want to start at the most basic with what is an accessing. So this is when a position is eliminated due to a reduction in local school budget, changes in programming, or drops in enrollment. We want to be very clear that while there are some positions that are very kind of clearly only one person has it, and so in our minds we would think, oh, if I cut that position, that person is accessed. That is not, in fact, what happens. And so we have to be very careful. This is truly about positions, not about people. Just because someone's position has been eliminated does not necessarily mean they are the one who will get accessed. So just keep that in mind as we go through this process because it is hard to separate, and oftentimes the district does not separate it and they are doing it wrong. What is not an accessing? Renaming a position that does the same job functions. We have very clear language in our collective bargaining agreement or CBA. You can check that out at 4.5.2.1. But basically, if it smells like the same job, looks like the same job, is job shaped, then it is the same job. That is just a title change. What we're seeing a lot right now are instructional coach to TLI or TLI to instructional coach. We view that as a title change. While there are some limited functions that might be different, teaching class versus not teaching class, they are essentially the same position, and therefore, in our opinion, and we believe it is a very strong opinion, that is a title change. And so it is not subject to accessing. It means the person gets to keep the job without reapplying. So when might an accessing be necessary? So really, it should only be necessary when there are more ET15s than there are positions. So there should be no current vacancies. If there is a current vacancy in the school, chances are an accessing is not necessary. There might be some very limited times where that could be the case, but basically if there's a vacancy, then there's probably not any need to access anybody. If there is someone planning to leave, like they filled out the DINR and submitted that, then again, that's essentially a future vacancy. So that means there should be no accessing. At least chances are high there should be no accessing. And if there's no newly open positions. So if there's a newly open position, again, like a TLI to an instructional coach, or maybe they cut the instructional coach position, but add another teacher, those newly created positions very likely belong to the person who could potentially get accessed. Again, it's not 100%, but I'd go with 90% plus of the time that person has a right to that position. And again, most of this we can find in our collective bargaining agreement in section 4.5. In this case, 3.2 is kind of the strongest language here. So let's say, though, all the conditions are met and an accessing is necessary. In April, so right now, LSATs should be reconvening to provide a recommendation on the area or areas of certification to be affected. It does not matter what position was cut. If an instructional coach was cut and there's only one, you still must do this process. We won that in arbitration. It is not optional for the principal. It is not optional for DCPS. So they cannot target somebody just because they're the only person holding the job. Just because you cut the position, you still have to then go to the next step, which is the LSATs providing a recommendation on the area of certification. And they can provide any recommendation they want. Maybe it would be logical. If an English teaching position gets cut in the school, then the area of certification to be affected would be English. But that process still has to happen. It's not optional. Well, I guess we'll get to it, but if the principal disagrees with this recommendation, they have to provide their reasoning in writing to me, or a copy has to be sent directly to me. In April and May, again, once the area of certification has been determined, then all the W-2 members in the affected area of certification participate in the performance-based excising process. So we're going to use the example of a TLI because this is the arbitration case we won. If a TLI social studies position gets cut, they're not replacing it with anything, they're just cutting it. Then let's say the LSAT meets and they say, well, then it is the area certification that will be affected is social studies. Then everyone who has a social studies area of certification and is using it will be part of the performance-based accessing process, even though only one of them was the TLI. All of them. And then that process uses a rubric where both the personnel committee gets to make a recommendation and the principal makes an ultimate decision on kind of a ranking of all those social studies certified people. And the person with the lowest points using that rubric is the one who will be accessed. It may or may not be the TLI. Now, other things can start happening in terms of people moving around, the excess getting rescinded, but that is the process. It does not matter who held the position that got cut. It is areas of certification that then go through the performance-based accessing process. The person with the lowest score in that is the one who'd be accessed. If it's two positions out of that same area of certification, then it's the lowest two, and so on. In May or June should be a notification. The deadline is 10 school days prior to the date of excess. That is not a ton of time. DCPS does usually inform people earlier, but they technically have until 10 days prior to the date of excess in the contract. So if someone is in the affected area of certification, they do have rights through the process where they get to submit evidence to the personnel committee for their consideration. They can also meet with the personnel committee to present that evidence. If someone is on the personnel committee who happens to be in the area of certification, they do have to recuse themselves in efforts of fairness. And it's, of course, meant to be confidential to all the people involved. So, as I mentioned, there's kind of two areas where the principal must provide their reasoning in writing. So one is around the area of certification. If, let's say, the LSAT says, well, actually, we believe a math area certification should be up for accessing. The principal says, no, it's going to be ELA. They do have to submit their rationale in writing, and that has to come to me, a copy. I can then request that the chancellor sign off on that decision before it goes into effect. So I see a question in the chat about when does the principal need to provide this in writing? It would have to be before it happens because I have the right to request a sign off. And so if they were saying it had already happened and there was a difference in opinion and I was never allowed to sign off on it, then that would be an issue. Leslie, you are able to unmute now. Unfortunately, I can only ask you to unmute. You're unmuted now, it looks like. You are unmuted, Leslie, but we can't hear you. All right, I'm going to remove the talking privilege. We can come back to it at the end. I just don't want to have to move the recording. Um, so it should happen before, because then I couldn't have asked for a sign off, and the sign off has to happen before it happens. So we are trying to use these steps to really slow the principals down a little bit, so they're not moving too hastily and skipping steps. And of course, should they skip a step and go through with it, then we can come back, and try to win people's jobs back for them not following the process. And on the whole, though takes a long time, so we don't want to get to that point, the W-2 has been successful in earning people back jobs in DC public schools. So another great question about principals interviewing for these positions. If they are trying to access someone in the building and they think they can interview a position, they are wrong. Period. Until the accessing process is played out, and frankly, shouldn't even happen if there's an open position that someone is qualified for, which we'll get to, then it just shouldn't happen, right? So if we go back to when an accessing is necessary, if there is an open position that a person who is potentially getting accessed is qualified for in the building, it's their position. No interview, no nothing. It is theirs. That's in the contract. It's clear as day. And we have one that not only is it just the word qualified, so they don't have to necessarily be certified for the job. They just have to be qualified for it. It's kind of a fine distinction, but again, it's another one we won in arbitration. So it's a necessary distinction. You don't necessarily need to be certified. Of course, being certified, extra protection. They really can't argue you're not qualified if you're certified to do the job. And it's no application, it's no competition. It's yours. Now, obviously, if there's multiple people potentially being accessed, then maybe there would be some space for the principal to say, well, you could be here, or they could be moving people around, which is their prerogative, right? Someone else from the school, but there'd still be an open position left over after the reshuffling. Like if someone went to third grade, another person went to second, and the second one is, or now the first grade position's open, then that person would be placed in the first grade position, but they would not be accessed. I think that's really the key point. Okay, we have a question on what is the union position or responsibility if a member has gone through the grievance process when the grievance the position held is accessed? Does one get written notice of an access or is it only verbal? Okay, so for the first part, if you mean that they were already let go and later they won their job back, that tends to be a little bit trickier depending on the timing of it all. But you do get a position in the school. It is not always, or not, sorry, a position in DCPS. It is not always at the same school. But a lot of that gets negotiated with DCPS as part of the winning of a grievance. So it can be pretty specific to a person. As far as the official accessing, it is in writing. And in the past, it has come from labor management, employee relations. Okay. Reduced, discontinued is an accessing. So just, sorry, here we go. Going back to it's eliminated. Doesn't matter what the reasoning is. A position was changed, a title change, It could have come from the central office. They could have said, we're not doing this position anymore. That's fine. That's their prerogative. It's still a programmatic change. It's still changing the situation on the ground. It is still an accessing. They can use any word they want. It's still an accessing and the process applies. Um, to the question about the TLI, no, they don't. They don't have to reapply. Um, Let me just finish this and then I'll get to the questions. Thank you for them in the chat. A few key things. If a building rep is excess, they automatically have the right to the entire process being examined for potential violations by the chancellor, along with all documentation pertaining to the excess. And we will be exercising that. So absolutely no building rep should be getting targeted. We know that happens. And so we have to do everything we can to try to prevent that. If someone is accessed, you have 60 days to find a position in DCPS or you are cut from the system. That being said, you could still find a job at the school. It is mutual consent, so you have to get hired at the school. But if you don't meet the 60 days, you could still, on day 61, get another job in DCPS. It's just technically for like a day. You weren't part of the school system. But as long as you return within, I believe, 3 years, all of your benefits and everything, can be restored, like your leave and things like that. If you're not hired, you made a good faith effort to find a job and have an effective or higher rating, and you've never taken an impact or lift bonus, there are some additional options. Option one, you can get a $25,000 buyout. Option two, you can get early retirement. It is a short window. You have to be close to retirement already. Option three, you can get a 1-year placement at a school. Again, only if you've never taken the impact or lift bonuses, are effective or higher, and you did try to find a job. And it's only for people who are excessed. So a couple just key things around strategy, and then I'll answer questions. So first, we believe we should be filing a grievance as often as possible throughout this process, every time a principal is breaching a step. So for example, if they just told someone, hey, you're going to be excess because your position was cut, but they didn't actually engage the LSAT and an area certification, they didn't have the personnel committee meet, file. And we can help you do that. So we believe that kind of each step, our goal will be to just meet with the principal, remind them what the steps are, and have them do it. Very simple. We're not saying it's impossible that you can't access anybody, but we want to make sure they're following all the rules and only accessing if it actually meets all the requirements, right? So if there's an open position, honestly, there's almost a 0% chance there should be an accessing. Again, there might be a rare exception, but most of us are qualified to hold a job in the building. And if a job has been open and we're qualified to do it, it's ours. That simple. Especially when it's a title change, TLI to instructional coach to TLI. That is a title change. It's their job. The contract is clear. If the principal is refusing, then we want to get in front of the instructional superintendent very quickly. And our hope is they see reason because they are not winning these in arbitration. We are. And then they owe a lot more money than just the pay. So we hope they see reason and stop wanting to do all these payouts and ruining people's lives and jobs and just do the right thing. Follow the process. Don't have all this chaos when it's unnecessary. That is going to require strong communication. Make sure your members know to come to you as if you're a building rep. If they have been told they're going to get access by anyone, obviously as building rep, you are hopefully a part of any LSAT conversations, and so you should be aware of what is being discussed. If there is any discussion of accessing and there is a vacancy or an open position and they are trying to hire for it, you need to cut them off. Do not allow that personnel committee to interview that person. And it does not matter if the person that's being accessed is someone you like or not, right? Like it is not their job to give away. And they are doing this to try to get around our contract and target people, and it's not acceptable. Um, it's sowing chaos and breaking up school communities for no reason. So please, please, please try to get your members to communicate with you if this is being discussed with them in any way, shape, or form. You can check out the job postings on the WT website, which I'll show you shortly. If your school's on there and trying to access somebody, you need to go to your principal and we need to try to block it. And we can help you if you need help. Um, we'll use organizers, grievance specialists, myself. Like we are really going to try to tackle this right away. So we just need to know that they're trying to hire someone and trying to access someone at the same time, and then we need to meet.